Hi everyone, we are back for chapter 8 of Bando the dog who led a double life. And what's this chapter about? It's that dreaded letter. Apart from the headlines and main stories which Bando dutifully read out to Mrs. Murthy, he didn't have time to pore over the newspapers. And Mrs. Murthy, of course, didn't read. So Bando was blissfully unaware of all the fuss. Fuss about? All the fans who were writing into the paper about who's this famous cartoonist whom we don't know about, that fuss. Until one fine day, when a letter arrived. It was from the City Times, so Bando just assumed it was the weekly check. Ripping open the envelope, Bando not only found his check inside, but there was also another letter. And Bando barely got past the first few lines before he broke out into a cold sweat. What could make Bando sweat? Dear Mr. Bando Murthy, the letter began innocently enough, I take this opportunity to congratulate you on your fast-growing fan club. If you've been reading the City Times, you're probably aware of the strong public interest in you. Will you kindly let us know if you are prepared to grant us an interview? It is not just the public who are demanding it, but we too at the City Times are extremely keen on meeting you in person. I think it is my duty to tell you that the circulation of our paper that had been dropping over the last year has started increasing after we printed your work. Can you imagine? Bando's cartoons had begun to increase the circulation of the City Times. Hope to hear from you soon. Yours sincerely, the editor. Now, how do you think Bando felt about this? Was he excited? No. Bando got very upset. He decided he had to put a stop to all this immediately. No interview and fan club and all for Bando. Remember, he was a shy dog. If the editor hoped to hear from Bando Murthy soon, his wish would be granted. Sitting down right then, Bando wrote a hasty reply. He apologized to the editor because he couldn't grant an interview. It was a matter of policy to protect his family's privacy. He scribbled, which was of course the truth. He didn't want Mrs. Murthy to be involved with all this fan club and interview and all that nonsense. He hoped the editor would understand. And then Bando added a series of little lies to his letter to put off the editor. He wrote that he, Bando, was a busy person. Now, is Bando a person or a dog? Was a busy person and would be out of town and hence unavailable for interviews for the next 3 months. Of course, this was not true. But Bando went on. The editor was not to worry because he, Bando Murthy, had made all the arrangements for his family to post one cartoon a week to the newspaper. This out-of-town work was very important, and Bando's letter went on and on like this with lots of little lies, basically to put off even the most enthusiastic of editors. By the time Bando got back from posting this letter, he felt quite pleased with himself. He was certain they wouldn't bother him for at least another 3 months, by which time he was sure that the so-called admiring public would have lost interest in this cartoonist. If they continued to pester him, he'd just give up cartooning altogether. In any case, Bando had made quite a lot of money by now in the last few months. Even after splurging on Mrs. Murthy, he had still saved up a tidy sum. His biggest expense had been a little music system for the old lady. So instead of dozing off, is somebody dozing off here? Instead of dozing off listening to some boring TV serial, Mrs. Murthy spent her evenings listening to her favorite movie songs. Initially, she had protested, warning Bando that they couldn't afford any such expensive luxuries. But of late, he'd caught her tapping her feet to the tune of Chal 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 Mera Hati. It's an old Hindi song. And when singing songs from the movie Mera Naam Joker in her bath. Bando had only one ambition left now. He'd long suspected that Mrs. Murthy's loss of sight could be treated. He believed that all he needed to do was to find a good doctor. Earlier, if he ever brought up the topic with her, she'd shrug it off, saying, "Come on, Bando, what do I need eyes for when I have you? You're my eyes. Anyway, I'm too old now. I've seen all that I've ever wanted to see when I was younger." But Bando knew that the real reason had been that Mrs. Murthy believed she couldn't afford expensive treatment. Now, with lots of money lying in the bank, Bando began to hope and make secret plans. He decided that he'd spend all his savings on getting the best doctors in the country for Mrs. Murthy. After that, if this interview business forced him to give up cartooning, it didn't matter. It would be sad though, because he truly enjoyed his new career. But to Bando, no job was worth interviews and fan clubs. He was a shy dog who loved the quiet life he shared with Mrs. Murthy. He also prepared himself for the possibility that maybe Mrs. Murthy's eye problem had no cure. But before giving up, he decided that he would keep looking for a cure till at least 3 good specialists told him there was no chance of restoring Mrs. Murthy's sight. Of course, the toughest task would be to convince the old lady herself that they now had enough money to go in for treatment. But Bando hadn't thought about how he would do that without telling her about his cartooning. That's the end of this chapter. Now I've got a little task for you. I'm going to send you one photograph and I want you to spot something in that photograph that has been irritating Muffin. Okay? She's been barking and I've been going outside and looking for what she's barking at. I haven't been able to find it. Can you spot it in this photograph?